So what I think you're going to find in this panel is we are going to cut through all the buzzwords and the stuff in this space and actually talk about what is workforce development, because those are two very distinct things. What should workforce development look like that can be inclusive in all aspects of that word? We're going to talk about multi-generational hiring. We're going to talk about industry-specific hiring. We're going to talk about first-generation entrepreneurs. We are going to talk about higher education and the role of higher education in this pipeline. So just to orient you to how this is going to go, we're going to start with introductions. We've got a pretty rock star panel here. So instead of me reading a bio, I'm going to let them each introduce themselves and what they do. I'm then going to facilitate about a 20-minute discussion around the topics I just talked about. And then at that point, we're going to open it up for discussion with the audience. So if you have questions as we're going along, if you have anything you've always wanted to ask, this panel has assured me that they will answer anything. And my colleague Jamal will run the mic for that portion of it. Does that work for everybody? Yes? Does that work for everybody? Yes. And if the participation's high, we'll bring a round of caipirinhas in at the end. Does that work? Does that work? I was telling these guys, with the amount of lime I've eaten here, I will never get scurvy. Like, that's it. So let me orient a little bit to why I'm so proud to be leading this panel. The company that I lead, we're a social impact consulting firm. Very proud of our team, because that's what makes us who we are. So Link is headquartered in Washington, D.C. We have offices across the U.S. and in the United Kingdom, based in Manchester, and hopefully in Brazil in the near future, based on how well this week has gone. We've had some phenomenal meetings with the state level leadership. At our team, our youngest employee is 15. Our oldest employee is 96. And those are not outliers. We have every generation really actively represented at our firm. My chief of staff, who many of you met, Jamal, is 26, and our director of mission optimization is 82. And I'm not sharing out of turn. They talk very much about that as part of their journey as well. About 65% of our team identify as women, and over 70% identify as people of color. In the communities that we're a part of, we try and hire from within the communities, and we try, nothing wrong with consultants, right? I lead a consulting firm, but we don't necessarily go and try and hire consultants and make them better consultants. We hire people with lived experience in the fields that we consult in. So if I'm going to do education work, I would prefer to have former teachers and former school janitors, et cetera, on my team. If we're going to do healthcare work, I want former health aides, et cetera. So we've tried very intentionally to do that. And one of the things we're going to talk about is, I think many companies want to do that, but a lot of them don't know how. And so for us, the pipeline part has been about finding partners in that space. So our high school level program comes through partnership with a group called the Urban Alliance. And in Washington, D.C., the Marion Barry Summer Youth Employment Program. They help source high school students to work in our company. We have an associate program, which is normally called an internship program, but for us, it's an associate program. It's a paid professional internship. It is not targeted just to students, though lots of college students apply. We also get a number of retirees who apply to the program. And because it's an associate program and you get a title and you get a business card and you're client facing, and you're paid well, it's a much more appealing pipeline to bring people in across the spectrum. And the last thing I'll mention is we are very proud to have a number of formerly incarcerated individuals on our team through a program that we work with called the Pivot Program out of Georgetown University, which takes folks who have paid their debt to society, done the time that they needed to do. They come back and Georgetown enrolls them in a business certificate program. They come out of the business certificate program and are placed with a business for a year. And the city of Washington, D.C., of which we have two folks who've played leadership roles in D.C., subsidize the wages for these employees for the first 6 months of employment. To me, that's kind of the perfect example of public-private nonprofit. You get a private sector, you get a higher education partner, you get the city. And so all of the stats that I'm very proud of, they come only through partnership. And so when we talk today, we're going to unpack that a little bit more. So that's me. I'm going to ask Maria to go next and talk a little bit about her.
This or that one? Okay. Hi, everyone. It's good to see all of you again in the morning. Thank you for waking up after last night. My name is Maria Velasquez. I've met a lot of you. I'm the founder and CEO of Casa Innovation. And I'm also the founder and CEO of Radiante Strategy Group, which is a social impact consulting firm primarily focused on the intersection of child welfare, social determinants of health, and strategic thought partnership. So I work with foundations like Annie E. Casey Foundation, Casey Family Programs, and entities like UCLA that are looking to, understand those subject matter expertise, but also very much to Michael's point, have facilitators, thought partners, and people at the table that have lived experience. Because the most important part of my introduction for you guys is not what I do for a living, it's who I am. And I am a political refugee, a proud Colombian American, the proud daughter of Ana Virginia Velázquez and Honorio Velázquez. And because of them, my story began in the United States. I spent 7 years undocumented in the United States waiting for political asylum. Right after 9/11, asylum was not in their priority, understandable. And so I have gone what I call the spectrum of from undocumented immigrant to Ivy League graduate. And all of those parts make me who I am today. It's also why, as soon as I got that green card, I moved to DC and started working with Ashoka. And when I worked with Ashoka, I learned about the concept of social entrepreneurship and then realized we're doing it all wrong. And I worked for about 8 years for an international nonprofit for children with type 1 diabetes. That introduced me to the concept of social entrepreneurship. In the pandemic, I came to visit Colombia. I've never lived there as an adult after leaving as a refugee. And I said, I'm going to stay. And I'm running my consulting business out of there. And I also founded Casa Innovation. And the idea of Casa Innovation at the beginning was to have an office space, an incubator for underestimated social entrepreneurs. In my mind, coffee's expensive. They can at least get free office space. Boy, did that pivot. We partnered with the Festival of the Diaspora, and now we're an incubator for underestimated social entrepreneurs across the Americas. And I don't need to tell you more because you see them every day while you're here. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you for that, and thank you for all of the work you've done around the festival. It's been absolutely remarkable. Angie Gates, can you introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Angie Gates. I'm the president and CEO of Events DC. Events DC is the official convention and sports authority of Washington, D.C. I'm the sports commissioner, and I'm whatever you need me to be on any given day. Before we get started, I do want to thank Maria and Cardell for hosting us for this wonderful festival. It's always great to be part of a festival that's making a difference. We play a major role in the entertainment and sports and convention and meetings industry. We focus on conventions and meetings, sports and entertainment, as well as creative services at Events DC. But what is key in my reason for being here is to talk about the workforce development and how we develop our industry in Washington, DC, and now in Brazil. So one thing that is key, we have our programs, our Strive internship programs that we host at Events DC, but we also make it a point to work with marginalized communities. We focus on returning citizens. We also focus on our veterans as well at Events DC, and those that are returning citizens, particularly our legacy residents as well. So you can get trained all day. We can develop and give you the tools and the training and the techniques you need, but what's next? At the end of the day, if it does not lead to a job, then that's a problem. So for us, we don't just stop at the training aspect. We also make sure that we dedicate funds in order for you to get paid, have a true viable employment. And we also focus in the tourism and hospitality industry. So we're in this wonderful facility, but it takes a lot to prepare for lunch, prepare for our meetings. So it's not just the individuals that's on stage. It takes a lot to get the stage set up. It takes a lot with the audio visual equipment. And so we want to make sure that we're focused on the vocational aspects as well. And I'll talk about that a little bit more.
Thank you. Gary.
Good morning. Again, I want to thank Maria and Cordell for this superb summit. I'm blown away not by just the content, but by the opportunity to engage with all of you in the corridor and the hallways. So I have this very unique background. So I see things through a global lens. So I live in Washington, D.C., but I was born in London, England. I spent time in Jamaica. My parents are Jamaican. I wear the colors very proudly. And I will say, if you have a chance to watch Bob Marley, One Love at some point, go watch it. It's a truly extraordinary movie, and go watch it. So I have a sort of global perspective informed by the immigrant experience, and then also a perspective informed that as I age, I become less concerned about risks. Because what can they do? All right? And so the filter is gone, and the boldness has kicked in. So I work in a space. I'm the founder of two organizations, the American Workforce Coalition, which is a political coalition, and CWI Labs, which is a think tank. The labs was created because I was noticing that as we think about workforce development and workforce equity, we never looked at it through the prism of folks as they age. It was always about younger people. And in the United States and around the world, older workers are being forced out of the workforce at a pace that is quite extraordinary. So there was no great resignation among older workers. They were forced out of the workforce. So that's a perspective that I've tackled. And because nobody was talking about it, we built a studio in our offices, and we began to interview lawmakers and CEOs and just call them out. Because philanthropy wasn't funding us, it was the Friends of Gary. So the Labs is the think tank. And then we run this $60 million a year operation that provides funding to a network of local organizations who are providing workforce training for older displaced workers across the country. I will get into in the conversation why the work is important. I will do some comparison and some analysis on where the US rank among other nations when it comes to workforce equity and inclusion. But this is a very important panel, and thank you for having me.
I love the One Love shout out. I was in Jamaica last week when the movie opened, and they said it was the largest movie opening in Jamaica's history. So, yeah, which makes sense. Rashad.
Young. I'm a Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer at Howard University, where we have the privilege of training and educating more than 13,000 primarily African-American students in just about every field of human endeavor. At Howard, I am responsible for a few things. I oversee real estate development and capital asset management, where we have $1 billion capital construction and redevelopment program. I oversee our government relations team that manages our relationships with the White House, the United States Congress, the DC Council and the Mayor's Office and neighborhood associations. And I also see strategy for the university and university communications. This is such a critical topic because certainly when you talk about diversity and equity in workforce, that is the business that we're in at Howard University. Making sure that our students have opportunities to engage in fields and in areas where they are underrepresented and don't have the opportunity to connect with the kinds of industries that we know they can be exceptional at and a magnificent at. I come to Howard from a public service background. So I'm new to higher education, having been in Howard just over 3 years. But my career has been spent in local government. I was the city administrator for the District of Columbia, where I worked with Angie for a number of years and where I met Michael and Link. Also the city manager for the city of Alexandria, Virginia, Greensboro, North Carolina, and my hometown of Dayton, Ohio. So public service and connecting to mission-oriented work has been my life's journey.
Appreciate that. I'm going to stick with you, Rashad. I'm glad you mentioned the public administration piece of it. I think you were the longest serving public administrator in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
And for those of you, I'm sure many of you do, but for those of you who don't know Washington, D.C., we are the District of Columbia. We will someday be the state of DC. In the meantime, we are a nearly $20 billion annual economy with 35,000 employees. So Rashad, I want to ask you in that context of running large governments, but also now that you're in higher ed, how do you see the role of higher education in workforce development? How are you conceptualizing that role?
Yeah, I think it's critical. I mean, when you think about what makes a city and you think about what drives its economic engine, it often is the human capital that is in that community. The business attraction, business retention is all about creating an environment, an ecosystem where you can capture the best and the brightest talent to grow that economy. And so colleges and universities, just by their very nature, are like the linchpin of an economic development strategy for a community. And what we've got to do as universities, and we've got to be better at, even in DC, is partnering both with the government and with the private sector on how to grow that human capital, how to create the economic development value proposition, right? So that companies want to locate, so that they recruit, so that they can build a knowledge economy, so they can build opportunity for the residents in that community. And colleges and universities are key to that effort. You really can't do it and be a thriving economy without a higher education ecosystem that provides that talent.
So the Howard University, I know, leads in many ways, but I also know there are certain industries where if not for Howard, you would not have the number of doctors and dentists. Could you talk a little bit about kind of what you are providing in a pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, Howard, the illustrious Howard University. I mean, we're a leader in so many things, but you hit that. The Howard produces more Black doctors and dentists in the United States than any other institution in the country. Without Howard, you would not have Black doctors. I mean, you literally would not have them in the country. We produce more undergraduates that go on to STEM PhDs than any more African-American undergraduates that go on to get STEM PhDs than any other institution in the country. So we're a leader in STEM and in science, in law, in communications, in social work. And so we really are able to produce the kind of individuals, diverse individuals that are taking by storm industries that are underrepresented. Health sciences, we have a school of nursing and allied health, right? We have a pharmacy school, one of the few HBCUs or Black institutions that train in pharmacy in the country. And so we're really additive in adding to the flavor, color, and complexion of the economy in very important ways.
So when you think of an institution of higher education, I think people have a very traditional sense of what that means. But I know Howard has a middle school and has a hospital. So can you talk a little bit about what makes up a modern global university?
Yes. So there are 14 schools and colleges at Howard University, and we do everything from divinity to biology to chemistry to fine arts. Dean Felicia Rashad is the dean of the college of the Chadwick Boseman College of Fine Arts at Howard University. So we're in entertainment and film as well. We do have a charter middle school on our campus where it is STEM focused, math and science focused. And so we do go from elementary age up through post-secondary in terms of who we engage with and what we provide. We have a College of Medicine, and that College of Medicine works in a hospital, the Howard University Hospital, that used to be the old Freedmen's Hospital. It was the first hospital for Blacks post-Civil War that was created in the country. And we're still on that same set of land that existed then.
I love that. I'm gonna move over to Maria, though. That thread just gave me a bunch more to pull on, which we'll do in a little bit. Maria, you focus on a lot, but you focus so much on entrepreneurs and first generation entrepreneurs. And as I was talking about with this panel when we were prepping, I think entrepreneurship runs the risk of becoming one of those buzzwords that we celebrate without unpacking, right? Silicon Valley, entrepreneurship, fail fast, fail often. They leave out, like, if your dad is rich and you can do that, because most of us can't fail fast and fail often.
If you're not Black or brown.
Exactly. So talk to me about how you define entrepreneurship in belonging.
One, I think that's why I fell in love with the concept of social entrepreneurship, although it also runs the risk of becoming a buzzword. When we jumped on the call, we defined entrepreneurship as something that in Latin America, for immigrants, for Black and brown communities, for marginalized communities, does not often come out of some fancy, shiny dream that you did a vision board for and that you planned for your whole life. It comes out of necessity. Some of our entrepreneurs, we were talking to one of our entrepreneurs last night. She came to me and said, Maria, guess what? I said, sure. She sells this wonderful jewelry. She said, I was just announced yesterday as the city department, government official, city department lead for the public health department of Chocó, which is the largest Afro-descendant region of Colombia. She said, I was just named yesterday. She's also an orthodontist. And in addition to that, she opened this business out of need to generate income for her community. I think she's here. Is Sandra here? She's not here. She's the one that sells the earrings. That's a woman that's an entrepreneur. It was born out of need. It was born out of passion. And it was born out of a need to generate opportunity for our community in a place where our communities are not receiving opportunity. And so I think for first generation entrepreneurs, across Latin America, it's definitely born out of need. And then within the United States, it's also a completely new concept. I always tell the story of my mother when I went to Penn and did my master's degree. And I remember having to sit down with my mother and say, okay, Mom, I'm going to teach you what an Ivy League is. And so she learns what an Ivy League is, and then she throws me the biggest graduation party ever. And so she goes on stage and she's like, this is what my daughter, she graduated from an Ivy League. And we're just going to leave it at Ivy League. But the concept transcends to begin in a business, to enter in a workforce that, if my mother did, and my mother is an extremely intelligent woman, but she does not navigate a system within the United States. So first generation entrepreneurs, both of immigrants and of marginalized communities, there's a sense of solitude in the component that I think we underestimate as a network.
When we talked earlier about what it takes to do this work well, if there are folks watching or listening that want to better support first generation or underrepresented entrepreneurs, how can they do that? What is needed to provide the ecosystem for folks to thrive?
So the way we define that at Casa Innovation is we say they're underestimated entrepreneurs, and we say that on purpose. Because yes, they're underrepresented, but oftentimes they're underestimated. And guess what? Often our own people do it. And so I think the very best way to support our entrepreneurs is, and I remember saying this to my staff once in the United States, I hated the quote. It was taught to me by a very explicitly racist woman. But I embraced it because the quote makes sense. She said, you got to teach them how to live in it without becoming of it. And I realized we are so afraid of coaching our own mentees, our own younger entrepreneurs on how to exceed and succeed in a system that isn't necessarily created or made for them, right? So we bring these wonderful entrepreneurs into this space, and yet we do them a disservice if we're not actually coaching them on how to navigate this space, how to maximize communities. And by the way, it's bidirectional. If we're not coaching us on how to welcome them and how to bridge the gap between them. And so I think that the supports are different.
Yeah. We talked again, we had this phenomenal prep call with the panel that I think lasted like an hour and a half. It was phenomenal. But I was referencing a study a few years back where this was a US-based study where new job hires on their first day of work at a Fortune 500 company were asked what their terminal career goal was. So first day of work, young people entering corporate America. And on day one, 12% of the respondents said that they wanted to move up to a leadership position. And on day one of the job, 68% said they wanted to leave and start their own business. On day one. Now, 68% aren't going to leave and start their own business for all the reasons we talked about, because entrepreneurship shouldn't only be defined as starting your own business. I think corporate America and actually many large institutions don't know how to allow and cultivate entrepreneurship within their ranks. So they force it to be a binary, stay here and give up all your side gigs or leave and good luck. I don't believe you see it that way at all. So can you unpack that a little bit?
No, I mean, so Cordell and I have this joke, and I mentioned it in yesterday's panel. We talk about the W-2 side hustle. right? Like we talk about it, like all of, I mean, if you look at some of us that are talking, we've got our, I got my consulting job, it pays for my stuff. And then I've got like the passion, Casa Innovation. And then then sometimes, I used to have a W-2 for a very long time. So I think, we need to embrace the nimbleness of what entrepreneurship means for our community and embrace that even within our own interactions, right? Like sometimes when I have conversations with, diasporic brothers and sisters, I'm like, so what are we going to get into together? Because like clearly we would, so I think that we need to embrace a culture of nimbleness and embrace a culture that adapts to the current reality. And then I think shame on us, I'm doing it. Shame on us living in the United States if we're not also creating a table, to go back to my quote yesterday, that is inclusive of the Americas, right? Because we are in a United States that has 60 plus million people who identify as Hispanic, Latinx, or Latino. And these people are not coming from US, they're coming from their countries of origin. And so for us to not create a network that supports the flexibility of where we all come from, it is a disservice to the innovation of entrepreneurship.
In the spirit of practical things to come out of this, as we mentioned, we both run consulting firms. We started something at Link called the Linkubator, where any member of the team can sign up to put their own side hustle or entrepreneurship through the consulting practice. So they can sign up, other team members, it's a client, they get a billable code, and our team can bill hours to. We have a photographer who also does weddings on the side. Why shouldn't we help promote that? We don't do weddings, right? We have a phenomenal entrepreneur named Joe Houston that just opened the first private gym in Ward 8 called WeFit. We did the branding and the media and the rollout while he was with us. There's no reason we can't do things like that. We have also provided an executive coach to every member of the team. So not just a coach for me, but every member of our team from our newest employee has an executive coach. What has that done? By making it okay to talk about what's next, our retention has gone up dramatically, right? So by letting people say, maybe this isn't my forever career, they actually stay longer and become better professionals in the process. Angie, I wanted to set it up that way because you run sports and entertainment. You run all these venues. You have this very large budget. You're doing all this great stuff. But what I hear you get most passionate about sometimes is this idea of pipeline, of development, and this concept of an academy that kind of trains people up. Can you talk a little bit about that and where that passion comes from?
Well, one of the things I talked about yesterday is I am fully of the belief that I'm living in my purpose. And that is why I'm so passionate about what I do. And not only that, I'm paying it forward. You talk about where you come from. Like I come from the dirt roads of Mississippi and the bayous of Louisiana. And I'm blessed to have my 81 years young mom here joining me today. So I'm going to give her a hand clap. Because if it wasn't for her being the matriarch of our family, we wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be here today. I had grandparents and great-grandparents, but as a little girl, and I think I was an entrepreneur maybe at age 5 and 6, because my grandparents couldn't read or write. Now, they raised me very well to be sitting in this seat I am today, but they couldn't read and write. And I used to have to go and pay their bills. So I took care of them as they were taking care of me. But how dare I have a title as president and as CEO and don't do something with it. As far as I'm concerned, I'm representing high heels and high places. But if I'm going to be at a high place, then what am I doing? I don't break glass ceilings, I shatter them. But in order to do that, it takes several of us to come together and strive and elevate each other, which I think is so important and so key. So through what I am announcing here, is the Events DC Academy. And the Events DC Academy is going to offer scholarships for individuals, particularly in the tourism and hospitality industry, to provide you with the necessary training needed and provide you with a salary to have a year-long length of employment to work in that profession. And it's not just going to happen in the United States of America. We're going to have someone right here in Brazil receive that scholarship as well, because we are totally connected and we have to stay connected. We can't come together for a few days and we accomplish a lot, but you have to stand behind what you say. You have to put actions behind your words. And that is what is so important through the Events DC Academy, for us to continue to leverage up each other in this process. And I'm looking very forward and excited to that opportunity. And I think what is also key, we got to learn from each other. You know, sometimes people talk about mentorships and they expect mentorships to be month-long. You can talk to somebody for 60 seconds and they can drop a gem that can change your life forever. So we got to mentor each other, and it comes, you know, in a variety of ages, a variety of demographics, education, non-education, it doesn't matter. If we don't take care of each other, then who will? And when I look at this festival, this is a festival for us, but it's also by us. So we're going to continue to elevate the game.
One of the things that I'm so excited about when I hear you speak, when you first learned of this festival and we had a discussion about would you come down and be part of the workforce development panel, and then there was a discussion of would maybe Events DC sponsor something like a reception. Events DC sponsored the reception last night. Thank you for that. It was fantastic. President Gates said, yes, we can do that, but I'd really like my sponsorship dollars to go to a scholarship, and I will add more of them if we can hire someone from Brazil into the academy. That to me is entrepreneurship, right? That's leadership saying, sure, I can do what you need, and here's what I think we can do together. And so I just really, really value that. Years ago, I chaired the board of the Greater Washington Urban League, and we launched an entrepreneurship center. And there was all this talk about the bank partners that said, we'll teach people how to access capital. And the entrepreneurs said, what I need is access to capital, right? Right? And so that's what the program did. You talked earlier about you can do all the training in the world, and if that pipeline leads to a closed door, intentionally or unintentionally, what are we doing? Talk about that a little more. I think that's powerful. How do you get the training to lead into employment?
So for any industry, whether it's entrepreneur, and it's interesting as we're talking about entrepreneurship, I feel like I'm an entrepreneur being at a authority in an organization, but when you do new things and things that are unprecedented and things that are not common, I'm like, wait a minute now, I think I can fall in that entrepreneur, category as well. But, I've been faced with no, or you're not accepted, or you wasn't the right person chosen for this job. And in my younger years, I thought, no, I remember crying and being so defeated, and who knew I needed that no in order to push me in the direction that I needed to go in. I'll never forget, I was going to be the entertainment director at this casino. I was running millions of dollars, and there's a test that you have to take, and I did not pass that test. And I've never been great with standardized tests, but I did not pass that test. And I could not have even been a cocktail waitress. I couldn't have poured ice in a cup. I was totally ineligible to work there. And I had a master's degree at that time and had ran a venue and was like the first African-American general manager at another venue. And so from that moment, I realized that you have to build the opportunity by training, but you also have to create the pathway to have someone get to the finish line. So you can get all the education, you can get all the vocational, all the tools. But if you try to get up to a door and it's locked or you can't come in, that's the issue. So, we talk about glass ceilings. We're going to bust down some doors too and make sure that you get to where you need to be in order to be inclusive, equitable, and we're just trying to live. Like, that's not that hard to do. And so for us, with our training program, we thought that we needed to have the vocational aspect, but also the employment. People hire all the time at different organizations, but you have to be deliberate and intentional on who you're hiring and what you're offering. And I think once you're even in an employment role, also creating a level of sustainability and a level of comfort, because you can get somewhere and feel like you don't belong and be getting a check in the process. You can be in a very uncomfortable environment and you're like, this is not who I am or what I represent. And I am typically the one person in the room that's saying opposite of everyone else. But I like to sleep real good at night. When you work hard, I like to sleep real good at night. So being an empathetic leader, understanding and having an appreciation of everyone collectively as a whole, but really making a difference is key and crucial.
Thank you. Gary, I intentionally wanted to come to you last on this panel because when we talked earlier and in the hallways at this conference, you have an amazing ability to find where things are connected. And so when I think of seniors, they are the ultimate entrepreneur. Older. They're the ultimate entrepreneurs in that they've had to redefine their careers multiple times. When we think about higher education and lifelong learning, when we think about all of this, it is multi-generational in nature, and that is your area. Talk to us a little bit about how we bring that issue and that focus more into the light, not just in your work in here, but when we go back, what do people need to know about the power of multi-generational workforces?
Thank you. As you were all speaking, I was reflecting on my own journey in the space and how situations and circumstances will change your worldview. Much of our conversation today is about success, not about happiness. And the two are, and it should be linked. So about 5 years, so I am an identical twin. 5 years ago, my twin died of a heart attack. And that day changed my entire life and my entire worldview. I began to travel more. I began to speak to people and audiences about notions of happiness and purpose. Friends who are successful in other countries, I noticed that at a certain age, they spent more time traveling. They could have been at work, but they chose to travel, to explore, to engage, right? And so when I think about workforce development, when I think about entrepreneurship, I think of what happiness means. I think about my journey through Chicago and Baltimore, cities with major African American communities. And when I drive to the south side of Chicago and I host my little town hall meetings, I'm in a community that is worse off today than it was 25 years ago. When I drive through the city of Baltimore, I'm seeing conditions. I feel safer here in Rio than in parts of Baltimore, right? So when we talk about inclusive growth, inclusive workforce development, inclusive hiring, we have to think about the communities and the people who have been so far left behind, it will take a generation to catch up. And the question we have to ask ourselves is what's going to happen to them? So back to your question, right? So in the workforce development, so research would tell us that an intergenerational workforce is always more productive. Older workers, mature workers, are able to bring qualities around problem solving, around working in a team, around how to navigate the complexities of decision making, around being patient, that you won't necessarily find among younger workers. You also find that older workers tend to be far more loyal. So once on the job, they will stay on the job. I can guarantee you, with a younger worker, 2 to 3 years they're gone, you're going to keep hiring and replacing and training. So those are sort of the basic things. But the larger issue in our country, in the US in particular, goes way beyond the experiences of younger, older workers in the workforce. We have a cultural bias against people as they age. And I refer to this as the water cooler hires, where you hire people that you think would be cool to hang out with at a happy hour on a Friday, right? I've seen that among my staff in previous reinventions. People were hiring people who are 5 years younger versions of themselves. And then you don't see the kind of diversity of race and gender and as a consequence of those kinds of decision making. But there's a larger set of issues that we should talk about in the context of the United States. So in the US, according to the World Economic Forum, we rank almost last among the world's largest economies when it comes to workforce spending as a proportion of our GDP. Almost dead last. Among the OECD nations, only Mexico ranks below us for workforce expenditure as a percentage of our GDP. So if Howard is trying to figure out how do we build a workforce fueled by our leadership, and our workforce expenditure is so far below our global competitors, then you're not going to find a pipeline to draw from because the funding isn't there to provide the support and training and placement that you would need as you think about the city in 10, 20 years' time. So that's some sort of a major issue. Then we have technology. I'm sorry, should I stop? Then we have technology, right? And one of the things that we have studied is the high concentration of African Americans and Latinos in 10 occupational categories that have a very high probability of disappearing over the next 5 to 10 years. So every time I pay a bill online, that's increasing the likelihood of a post office being closed. When you walk into a bank, if you can find one these days, and a bank is being closed, right? That's where many African Americans were working as tellers, right? They're gone. Supermarkets have now more automatic machines than they have people at that's where we were. Bus drivers and train drivers, right? Those are occupations that will also disappear as a result of. So my question, my concern is, what will the future look like for older people and minorities in a world that has been driven by automation, technology, and AI? And that's a really scary proposition.
I love that. Everyone keeps giving me time signals, and they keep getting shorter and shorter. So we're gonna take a few more minutes because I did promise the audience that we would take some questions. Is there anyone out there that has a question for the panel? And then I'm going to come back to the panel for a closing thought. Any questions from the audience? Right here.
Hi. Super interesting. It's really great hearing from all of you. I'd like to know where dreaming comes in. I have a friend, a black friend from Rio, whose community was removed by the mayor right before the Olympics, for the Olympics. And at that time, when he was battling the mayor, he was studying accounting, wanted to be an accountant. After he lost that battle, he and his mother lost their house, he decided he wanted to be mayor. And he changed, he lost everything he'd done in college and went to another school to study public administration. After that, he went to live in China. Now he lives in Lisbon. He's had a startup. He's done a million things. I think he will at some point come back to be mayor. But I wonder, Does somebody have to lose their house to be able to dream?
Take that.
I'll try that. No. Because even if that dream becomes a nightmare, you can always keep dreaming. So my friend in Dublin ran a successful business. The business went belly up. He went bankrupt. He kept dreaming. He bounced back with a new business. That business is allowing him to travel, to connect, to live his purpose. Many of us, and one of the things we don't talk about is our setbacks. So I've had 2 experiences as a CEO where my contract wasn't renewed. I didn't give up. I just kept going. And we all talk about our successes. We don't talk enough about our vulnerabilities. Yeah. And in life, we do suffer setbacks. Yeah. But how we bounce back defines really who we are. So we can keep dreaming.
I agree so much with that. And I think as we can, we have to provide the risk sponsorship for those who are dreaming. This idea of risk sponsorship is so important to me. Why do kids dream big and adults don't? Because adulting is about self-preservation, which is about risk avoidance. So if we're going to tell people to dream big, we have to backstop them when they screw up the first time and the second time and the third time. We have a big sign in our office that says, mistakes are proof that you're trying. Our 96-year-old senior advisor brought that in, and I loved the spirit of it. And then I said, but people also pay us to do professional work. So we added a Post-it note that says mistakes that you learn from are proof that you're trying, right? And so I think there's that.
Yeah. Well, actually, I could do my closing thoughts with that because I think my answer is connected to your comment on purpose, which we've connected over for the last 2 days. And I think one of the things that they call this soft skills, I hate it, but one of the things we often ignore is that as we work with underestimated, underrepresented communities, we cannot ignore the impact of the generational trauma that we carry, right? We cannot ignore the impact of the, I call it the, imposter syndrome, the immigrant weight, the diasporic weight. We, as communities, have to be careful when we're developing a workforce. We have to be careful that we're not creating a workforce that perpetuates a work-obsessive community. Because we come from trauma and a weight that we can do nothing but work, that we cannot stop. And I say that myself. My team is here. They constantly remind me I do not know how to enjoy myself. I am, and the way I describe my family and I is we are not families, we're brothers and sisters in arms that made it through conflict and continue to live life defending ourselves from conflict. And so if we truly want to support our underestimated entrepreneurs, we actually have to take the time to teach how to rest, how to dream, and then and also how to take time for ourselves.
We are in our closing 2 minutes, and I'm going to do this with the blessing of the panel, I hope. I listened to the news when I got up this morning, and all of my soul that had been so full started to deplete again because the world is heavy, and the topics we're talking about here are heavy. So I'd like us to close on something that gives us hope. What gives us hope? Who would like to start on that?
I think I really am so appreciative of working in this space that I work in now because our students and our young people give me hope. I was sharing a story with my wife, who's here with me, a couple weeks ago. 2 students emailed me and said, hey, we want to come meet with you about a business that we developed. These are sophomore computer engineering, double minored. I mean, everybody at Howard has a major and like 4 minors. And so they learned coding between their freshman and sophomore year, developed an app that they want to lease to the university to sort of bring all of this information resource together that makes all of their lives and our lives easier, right? And they figured out how to monetize it, a business plan. That's hope, to see these bright, young, innovative, exceptionally talented minds who are going to do amazing things in this world.
Well, it gives me hope. That's a question I always ask. I think it's. I mean, I have a greater appreciation for humanity now. I think what COVID had given all of us really was a sense of perspective, right, about who we are, about how we engage with one another, about being patient, about being loving. And I think those qualities, I hope, has creeped into our consciousness in ways that will define how we live our lives going forward. I hope and I believe that our workforce is resilient. I believe with opportunity and investment, we can create an inclusive workforce that functions outside of the political noise around wokeism, right? Because I really believe that people in their hearts of hearts are fundamentally decent. And that gives me hope.
From the moment I wake up and open my eyes, that's hope for me. Every morning, the moment I wake up and open my eyes, that's hope. From the moment my feet hit the ground, from getting out of bed, that's hope for me, because I've lived another day to make a difference in my life, in the life of someone else. This festival is hope. The convening of us coming together, that represents hope across all different parts of this world. That's hope. And as I gaze into the eyes of everyone in this room, it's a reflection of myself. That is hope. You are hope.
We're gonna end on that note with a huge thanks to our volunteer Blessing, who got the room ready, the techs who made the sound work, the translators, and Anna, Mom, Shane, Tamika, and Jamal, who helped put this all together. Thank you all.